Welcome to our exciting new podcast, It's a Yes, Making It in Media, where we hope to help you get hired and stay inspired.
I'm Jo Wood, MD of the Media Exchange. We've been recruiting for the media industry for a very long time.
I'm Debra Sharron from Media Sales Training, designing and delivering training solutions for media professionals.
Between us, we've spent several decades scarily helping people build successful media careers, from first jobs to senior leadership. Whether you're applying for your dream job, waiting to hear if your ideal candidate has accepted your offer, or you're waiting for a client to sign off that target-hitting deal, we know that the words you most want to hear every day are, it's a yes. That's why we decided to create It's a Yes, Making It in Media, to see if we can help.
Each episode, we'll get together, occasionally with some guest experts, and chat through answers to your questions. Plus, we're excited to be creating and sharing the Yes List. Each episode will recommend a book, a blog, video or podcast, which we hope you'll enjoy. And please do email us with your suggestions too at hello@makingitinmedia.com.
So, podcast. Are we mad, Deborah?
Everyone's doing them. It feels like we probably should think about it.
I'm one of those people that just says yes.
You say yes? That might be your favourite word.
It absolutely is.
Well, when do you like to hear that word?
All the time. Yeah. I think we should tell our audience a little bit about us.
So when was the first time we met?
Scarily at university.
Where we weren't particularly friendly. No, I was a bit nervous about you, to be honest, Jo. And I think you probably didn't think that I was quite your cup of tea. Actually, people would be interested to know what you studied at university.
Yeah. So, as you know, I did pharmacy at university.
A natural precursor to a career in media recruitment.
I qualified as a pharmacist and spent 4 years working for Underwoods. Do you remember them?
Vaguely, yeah. You're showing our age now.
Big chemists all over town, taken over by Boots.
Yep.
Yeah. Boots offered me a job and I just thought, no, I don't really like pharmacy.
After how many years of studying it?
3 years at university, a year of a pre-reg.
Right.
Yeah. On my way home from work, in the paper, there were 3 ads for a recruitment consultant. And I had some friends who did recruitment, thought it seemed like an interesting idea. And I applied for one, which I got, which was astonishingly selling office equipment. And they gave me a copy of Brad. Do you remember Brad?
Certainly do. Our listeners may not.
So Brad was a big directory of every kind of media publication out there. And they basically gave me Brad and they said, we think we can make some money from here. Can you see if you can find some vacancies? Yeah. And I just picked it up and I started calling people.
Amazing. I had no idea that's how you started. And so you were enjoying that a lot more than you'd be enjoying pharmacy. You naturally found it interesting.
I loved sales and I had no idea that that was something that I would really enjoy. But it does just show, okay, that, you know, when you're 18, you don't necessarily have a clear path. You don't necessarily know what you want to do. Mm-hmm. You get led in a particular direction, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't change direction at some point down the line. And I was quite lucky because when I did change direction to go into recruitment, I already had bought a flat back in the day when flats were affordable. Yeah. And I locumed on Saturdays so that I could pay my mortgage.
There was something about picking up the phone and speaking to people that you naturally enjoyed.
I spent my whole youth on the phone to friends. That was the one thing I knew I could do. Yeah. Selling, I had no idea I could do that.
So maybe that's quite interesting in itself, which is that if you're interested in something and it suits your personality, you can be successful in it without labeling yourself as being a particular type of person. I left university having done an English degree and was interested in magazines, but thought I'd be a journalist rather than the commercial side. Because again, as you're saying, I didn't know the commercial side existed. But one thing led to another, and I ended up being a graduate trainee at what was then IPC magazines and really enjoyed selling. And I never thought that I was a salesperson, but I loved the environment of media and the people. And it was really interesting. And you just kind of chatted to people and learnt about businesses. And I got involved with it.
It's funny, isn't it? Because if you say sales to most people, even now, that's still a scary proposition. It's not what people think of as a real career. Yeah. And here we are, having both assumed that we were going to do something completely different. And we landed, both of us, in commercial roles, having not known the first thing about it.
I think it's a real shame that more young people don't see that the skills you have in the media sales environment will set you up for life. So when I eventually joined IPC, the first department they placed me in was the sales team. And I was absolutely horrified, and I just did not want to do it. I thought, well, I'll go into marketing and I'll spend some time with the editorial team, and then I'm going to be off because this is something I'm going to hate. But I really enjoyed it in a way that I could never have imagined, and ended up staying there for, I think, 3 or 4 years, working on some lovely consumer magazines and ending up running a sales team. I came to meet you again when I was on maternity leave.
You did. I remember.
I had moved by that stage to another consumer magazine publishing company and had a very happy time there. And while I went on maternity leave, I decided to explore whether it would be at all possible to have any flexibility upon my return. So I was keen to see whether I could come back to work 4 days a week, possibly with the option of working from home on that 5th day. And I was faced with an absolute hard no. It was not going to be an option. There would be no flexibility.
I don't think that's astonishing when you think about where we are now, yeah? And the extent of the flexibility that's a possibility.
Yeah. Well, no one trusted that you could do your job any other way than being in the office 5 days a week. And I think the world was a different place. And I'm so pleased for younger parents now in the workplace that there are more ways for them to be able to provide value. And it's not quite as rigid as it once was. So I found myself tootling down Great Portland Street to come and see that old friend Jo Wood, who now was firmly ensconced in her own business, the Media Exchange. I remember carrying a particularly heavy bucket seat with small baby intact, and we sat in your offices and
we did
try to explore whether there would perhaps be other ways of being able to come back into the workplace. It was really interesting to see where you'd got to, and from then we were then moving in similar circles and we became friends. Okay, so you set up the Media Exchange. You decided you wanted to run your own business. What made you decide that so early on?
There are lots of things that you learn when you're working for somebody else. And one of them was that I actually wasn't very good at it. I think I was a very difficult person as an employee. I grew up in a family where my parents ran their own business.
Okay.
And I guess I just wanted that independence. When you're young, you don't really realize the risk involved in that. I was quite headstrong. Actually, I was very headstrong. Yeah. And I just thought, I want to do this.
And are you happy that you did?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. What's been the best thing? What's been the best thing about running your own show?
Just the excitement and the sense of achievement.
So it never gets boring.
It never gets boring. It has millions of challenges, but not boring.
And what about managing other people? Because you've got a team at the Media Exchange, haven't you?
I do have a team. I've been really lucky. Most of the team have worked for us for a very long time. And that, I think, is a unique differentiator in media recruitment. And, you know, we're like a big family. Yeah. And there are lots of ups and downs and lots of things along the way that have occurred. But basically, we've worked together through some seriously difficult times. Half the team have worked for me for more than 10 years.
Whoa.
In fact, nearer 20 years. That makes it really unique. And it means that we all know each other really well. And that's, you know, both good and bad at times, to be perfectly honest. But it's unique.
And presumably over the years, you've seen candidates become clients because you've been in the same space for such a long time.
Actually, one of the best things and the most exciting thing is looking at the number of people that we placed as trainees who've gone on to be senior people in the industry. So one of the benefits, of working with a recruitment consultant is the relationship we have with the clients means that as a candidate, you get to circumnavigate all of the preamble, trying to get your CV through and to the right person. Yeah. And we work really hard to have the kind of relationships that mean that we can project what you have to offer beyond what it says on the piece of paper, and often can persuade a client to see somebody that they wouldn't normally have done. And for me, the greatest sense of achievement is when you get somebody a job that where they don't tick all the boxes of the job description, but where we've been able to identify something about them that means that we can see why in the long run they're going to be better than somebody who does tick all the boxes.
What interests me is in this digital age where we keep getting told that AI is going to replace everybody, the human connection, the trust that you've built up, and your ability to present a candidate in the right way to a company is incredibly powerful and incredibly successful, and it achieves things that technology on its own probably would struggle to identify.
I think it does, but I think that the biggest challenge for us all is that internal talent acquisition teams are being led to believe that using AI for selection purposes, that basing every decision that they make on technology is what they ought to be doing. And that intrinsically eliminates the personal human touch. One of the ways that we work best is with talent teams who also embrace communication with hiring managers. When we have access to hiring managers, we find it so much easier to find people who are a little bit off piece, because hiring managers broadly in media are salespeople, and they are open to ideas and suggestions. It isn't always about your connections or exact experience in that space. It's about demonstrating the right kind of attitude and skill set and achievements doing something else that can translate into what they're looking for.
And I'm sure we'll come back to this in future episodes, just the impact of AI across the whole of the recruitment and the sales industries.
There's no question that we need to embrace AI and see what the value can be without losing that human interaction. And that's going to be a challenge. I think it's a challenge for everybody in media going forward. You could automate everything. It would all be very dull.
Absolutely. And actually, Jo, what that brings me to is a question that's already come into the podcast from somebody who is looking to update their CV and wanting to know what the best way is of creating a CV that will allow them to present themselves in the right way. So I'm just interested to know whether you've got any thoughts about that, and whether we should all be creating our CVs with an AI platform, or whether there are other ways of being able to sell ourselves, which ultimately is the first pitch that we're ever going to be doing.
There is something to be said for the fact that if you standardize your CV, you'll get it through more of those talent acquisition systems. But actually, does that make standout? I would argue no. Do I think that you should create a CV that is a creative, wacky doozy thing with pictures and stuff? No. But do I think that you need to inject some degree of personality into your CV? Yes. How you do that can be a challenge. I'm not somebody that thinks that there should be pages and pages of information on your CV. In fact, most of the time, I think a CV should be a window into your achievements, but it obviously needs to be clear what you've done and what you've achieved in a concise way. So in short, no more than 2 pages. No matter how much experience you have, it's very common for senior people in the industry to put reams of prose, and no one reads that. Talent acquisition people, hiring managers, they read the first 2 or 3 sentences. You just need structured where you've worked, how long you've worked for, and then 6 bullet points for each job in the first or most recent 2 or 3 jobs, that show achievements, successes, what you've done above and beyond anyone else who may have been in that space. And then a little bit at the end about, your personal interests.
I was going to say, people often discuss whether personal interests have got any value or not. I'd have thought your interests could be quite a good window into the kind of character traits that you have, even if you haven't had the most relevant media experience. Now, email here from Marcus, who's in London. Marcus says, I've been in my current media sales role for 3 years and I'm consistently hitting target. Well done, Marcus. My manager keeps saying, great job. But when I ask about a promotion, I got a vague, let's revisit this the next quarter. How do I actually get promoted rather than just being the reliable person who does their job well? This is a big question, isn't it, Jo? How do salespeople get their next step when they're doing so well? What would you suggest is the answer to Marcus?
I think that's quite a significant challenge, actually, Marcus, because there could be all kinds of reasons beyond your control that you're not actually getting a promotion. It might be that whilst you are part of a team and you are reaching your targets and generating the revenue that's required of you, the rest of the team are not performing, and therefore the budget isn't there just to give you a promotion or a pay rise.
I wonder whether it's useful for him to have a conversation with his line manager and agree specific objectives that he needs to focus on, let's say within the next 3 to 6 months. So at least he feels like he's adding to his skill sets and he knows what is going to be needed by the business.
There should be a very specific result as a consequence of reaching those targets in 3 to 6 months, so that he could actually plan ahead for knowing if he does this, he will either get a particular bonus or a specific pay rise or something very tangible so that he feels rewarded. And failing that, Marcus, if you really are that star in the team,
here she goes again,
you need to move on.
I think it's a real challenge though, which is that when you've got a star performer on a team, very often the manager's attention is not really focused on that star performer, because if they're steady and performing really well, manager probably is busy looking at how they can support perhaps less well performing team members. So you can understand that possibly Marcus is feeling that he needs a bit more management attention, recognition for what he's doing, and clear goals for moving forward.
Honestly, 3 years is the time that a lot of media salespeople get itchy feet for exactly this reason. And perhaps this is a thing that line managers need to think about, that there's a couple of kind of pressure points. One's at 18 months and the other is somewhere between 3 and 4 years, where hiring managers tend not to think about what next. They just think that, well, there's a good person in my team, we'll just carry on like that. And if you look at career histories, you can see very clear evidence that people move at 18 months and at 3 to 4 years.
But I wonder also whether there's something interesting in the fact that a lot of salespeople see that the next big promotion, once they've achieved their sales goals, is to move into people management. And that's a very weird move for somebody who's high performing. So I wonder whether actually it's worth the manager having a conversation with Marcus about what his ambitions are looking like, because if he can be very happy becoming a sales superhero with some bigger targets and bigger rewards, then that might just be good for the business and good for Marcus.
Okay, so this is an age-old problem, because in actual fact, there are a lot of salespeople in media that don't necessarily want management, but the structures in companies are geared towards promotion being only into management, and that being a very clear recognition of what you've done and achieved. And there are not appropriate pay rises or increasing job titles for people who do just want to stay in sales. Interesting enough, in the SaaS tech space, they are much better at rewarding solid, strong performers.
But it seems a little bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because if not all good salespeople become good managers, why should that be the only existing channel for promotion? Every business wants to make more money. So if they can create another parallel system for sales superstars, you'd think that would be very appealing to somebody who's very able.
I completely agree, but it isn't the case. No. And it never has been the case. And it's about how your peers view you if you don't take up the opportunity of management.
But I've seen managers, really capable salespeople, then taking on a team, and it's almost like they're expected to develop a completely different set of nurturing skills.
Well, it is a different
and they
set.
hate it.
Completely,
They absolutely hate it. And if I think back over my career, I have tried to do it, but actually, if you're a salesperson and you're very motivated by hitting a target, sometimes managing other people just gets in the way a bit.
I think it can be really challenging. Yeah, and I don't think it's for everybody. That's for sure.
No. Well, Marcus, I hope that's been helpful. Let us know what happens. My nomination for this episode's Yes List is a book called Surrounded by Idiots by Thomas Eriksson. I just love the title. But this is one of those books that's absolutely massive in Sweden and has become a bit of a phenomenon worldwide. Eriksson takes this personality model called DISC and packages it up using colours, which makes it very simple to understand. You've got red people who are competitive and direct, yellow who are chatty and optimistic, green types who are calm and supportive, and blue people who are analytical and detail-oriented. The premise is that most conflicts and misunderstandings happen because we're all speaking different behavioural languages. Like a red person thinks a green person is being indecisive, whilst the green person thinks the red one is being pushy. What's brilliant about the book is how practical it is. Erickson gives you lots of real-world examples and tips for adapting your communication style. So if you're dealing with a blue person, bring data and give them time to think. With a yellow, keep it fun and engaging. It's not groundbreaking psychology or anything, but it's incredibly accessible and genuinely useful for work situations, family dynamics, basically any relationship really. Loads of people say it's transformed how they understand the people around them. Definitely worth a read if you've ever thought, why doesn't everyone just communicate like I do? Spoiler alert, they can't.
Thanks for listening to It's a Yes, Making It in Media.
This podcast is shaped by the challenges you're facing. So if there's a situation you'd like us to explore,
just send us an email at hello@makingitinmedia.com.
Follow the show, leave a review, or share it with someone who's ready to take their next step.
See you next time with more tools and tips to help you succeed.
Just before you go, if you found today's episode useful, we're running a live and interactive Zoom training workshop very soon. You'll have a chance to dive even deeper into today's topic, and we'll share top tips and insights you can use straight away. So just click on the link in the show notes for all the details. We'd love to see you there.